Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea: how to bring back the racetrack.
We discuss horse racing and why we've recently fallen in love with it.
Plus, we deep dive into the reasons why one of America's most popular 20th century sports ain't so popular anymore.
Finally, we go full Shark Tank and take turns pitching ideas on how to make horse racing relevant again. That's right, we're playing everybody's favorite game, Horse Tank.
It's all coming up, but first, here's the Solons.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Hey, we're talking about horse racing here on the Flynn Brothers podcast. And, buddy, I want to kick it over to you because you were the first of the Flynn Bros to first go to a horse racetrack. What'd you find? How was the experience?
Yeah, it was an idea that we had when my high school friends and I turned 18 years old. We had bought cigars, and we were like, well, where can we smoke a cigar? We were thinking, and this was, I believe, an epiphany you and I had later. But the only place you can really smoke a cigar these days is the horse racetrack.
Yeah.
So we went to Golden Gate Fields, beautiful day by the bay, breezy, 60, sunny. We got dressed up in thrift store attire. I was wearing a vest and a bow tie, I believe. It was Dollar Hot Dog Day, which was great. We all killed about 3 dogs each. We were in our cigars. We were in our outfits, thinking up the whole place. And every single bet we made, we lost. Every single one lost. But it was still an absolutely great time. You were outside. You were with your buddies enjoying the newfound freedom of adult life. You're seeing these beautiful, majestic animals thunder down in front of you to thrilling conclusions. And it was just an all-around great day. One of the finest of the post-high school summer.
Yeah, this was back in, summer of 2012 probably was when you graduated high school. Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And Golden Gate Field, not to date you here, but Golden Gate Fields, we'll get into this later, but it has since closed. There was a racetrack up in the Bay Area. Where was it? Berkeley, San Francisco?
Yeah, kind of outside of there, yeah. Not exactly not an urban area, just sort of off on its own next to the waters. And so we were driving home, my friends and I, after finishing off our cigars in the parking lot. And one of my friends, I look in the rear view mirror, and he's a bit green around the gills.
Oh, boy.
And we're like, you all right back there, buddy? He's like, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. And 20 seconds later, he pukes hot dog out the window all over everything in the backseat. We pull over to a gas station. There's nothing but paper towels. So he's back there cleaning it up with paper towels, clean it up. Takes about 20 minutes. Gets back in the car. We get back on the freeway. We're doing, one of those like big loops onto the freeway.
Oh, sure,
when you enter on an on-ramp.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm just gonna lay down in the back seat here for a second.
Yeah.
And puked all over again. Hot dog everywhere, looking green and white, pallid.
Yeah.
And then luckily, the next gas station we went to, they had a vacuum cleaner, which
good.
ended up better. So that's my racetrack.
That's your racetrack story. Yeah, cigars and hot dogs, a pretty noxious combo for the old gut. I didn't go to a racetrack until this past year. This would have been spring of 2024. I, too, was in a situation where I had a cigar and didn't know what to do with it. If you'll recall, we were up in Sacramento back home for Easter, and we had cigars with our Uncle Dave, a cigar aficionado. We wanted to have some post-dinner cigars. So he does a big, long 2.5 hour smoke
Churchill.
of a Churchill-esque cigar. And we can't really put cigars down that easy. So I think we split one, and we only got about halfway through. So I had about half a cigar. You were nice enough to let me take it back to LA. And I was in the same situation. I didn't know where in this modern world I could smoke a cigar. Really, my only options that I could think of were a bus bench, which isn't too glamorous. Certainly can at the apartment. But yeah, I really couldn't think of anywhere. So just by happenstance, I was driving out to Arcadia, which is east of Los Angeles here in Southern California. And my girlfriend was taking me out there. We were going thrift store shopping, thrifting. And
I'm familiar with
you're familiar with the concept of buy used clothes, etc. And we were driving out there, and I see this beautiful green hedge that just goes on and on and on. I'm like, man, what is that place? So I pull up my map and I look at it, and it's Santa Anita Park, the racetrack, horse racing track. And I was like, by golly, racetrack, that's where you can have a cigar. So I told her that next weekend it'd sure mean a lot to me if we went out to the horse races and I could have my cigar. When I first went, though, the whole day's built around me having half a cigar in public.
How did she feel about you consuming a cigar?
She didn't love it. I was really racetracking it up. I had a bucket hat, a really too far button down dress shirt. I wanted to play the part of the gambler at the racetrack. So I went out there, and as soon as I'm entering, I see a no smoking sign. And so I'm just like, oh man, is this all for naught? And we walk in, and luckily, the first thing I see is a man smoking a cigarette. And I was like, I think this day will be just fine. But then, yeah, we went back for your birthday, which was a couple months later. Yeah. And, I remember how much you absolutely loved it. So I thought it'd be cool for those listeners who can't make it out to the Santa Anita Park, the horse race track, considered by many one of the most beautiful racetracks in the entire world. We give them kind of a virtual tour, if you will.
Sounds great.
Fabulous. Let's walk them through it. So when you first walk in, it's worth mentioning it's very cheap to go to the horse races. It's only $10 for general admission. You can spend more. You've seen those
yes, the owners' boxes, the luxurious sort of ways to watch the race. You're closer to the finish line.
Steak dinner, stuff like that. That wasn't for
Oysters,
us. We just
Rockefeller.
We just
Lobster
wanted
Thermidor.
We just wanted chicken a la king. We just wanted general admission. So we walk in, and it's absolutely beautiful when you walk in. There's fountains, there's gardens, there's this huge life-size bronze statue of Seabiscuit, who was a real horse, not just the film wasn't fictitious. It was a real horse, but I learned in the research for this. Rather celebrated. But yeah, you walk in, and I remember you pointed out the architecture. You really enjoyed the architecture of the place.
Stunning architecture, Art Deco, colonial revival.
I think we determined that was correct.
But it's literally like almost walking into a courthouse or one of those great buildings that you would find in a downtown of one of the great cities of this fine nation that we live in.
And the colors are like mint green. Yes. There's kind of a yellow sort of color palette to the whole place. And when you immediately walk in the entrance to the right, you see the stables where the jockeys are preparing the horses, where if you as a gambler are looking at the horses to see which horse you want to bet on, you can go over there.
You're sort of elbowing your way past the other looky-loos.
Of course, yeah. And that's where you can have your cigar, your cigarettes. You're in kind of an open air environment. And after the stables, the horses, before they go race, are led to a walking ring, which, similar to the stables, that's where gamblers will go scout the horses. They'll be walked around so you can look for different things. The horses gait.
How big they are, how muscular they look. Do they look like they're chomping at the bit to get out there racing? Do they look focused? Do they look distracted? How does the jockey look? How do the owners look? Is there sweat on the horse? How vascular is the horse?
Right. I was more looking at the sheen of their coat, but yes, you saw more than I suppose.
Looking at the veins.
Yeah, and So you go past the walk-in ring, and there's this big, I would call it a concourse. It's a big enclosed area.
I believe they do as well.
They call it a concourse. Yeah. Well, maybe they got it from me, but it's a concourse, and they got bars, and you can get some food and stuff. They have a Dole pineapple whip. You know that whipped soft serve with the pineapple?
I do. We went to the Dole plantation in Hawaii. Yeah, that's the only other place I've seen it.
Yeah, so they got Dole whip there if you like Dole whip. And so after you go through the concourse, and in the concourse, that's also where you place bets and stuff, which we'll get to later. But as you go past the concourse, you see the track. And that's what I would call the grandstand, the stadium, right? It's kind of.
I believe that's also the name
that's what I would call it. If that's what other people call it, that's their prerogative. But the grandstand, it's beautiful. As you mentioned, the people eating the steaks, the lobster thermidor, those reserved seats are kind of at the finish line. General seating is more down kind of the home stretch, and then the money seats are at the finish line.
Think your typical ballpark seating arrangement. Hard plastic chairs that fold down, metal armrests.
And one of the greatest things about Santa Anita Park is the view. Behind the racetrack, as you're looking at the racetrack, in the distance are the San Gabriel Mountains. And usually early in the day, the horse races usually start around 12:30, 1 o'clock, go to about 6 at night. The clouds kind of cover the mountains. And as you're there about 2-3 3 o'clock, sun burns off, and you just see these beautiful mountains over.
Stunning. Really, really gorgeous. They've got the classic sort of Southern California look to them. It's just a really wonderful view, because the horse races, they go about every 30 minutes. So there's a fair amount of just killing time, hanging out, sitting there. And it's just one of the great things to look at.
You mentioned baseball and the stadium seats. It is kind of like going to a baseball game where people talk about what they enjoyed. The smell of the peanuts and the crack of the bat and, just the camaraderie of all the people there.
Which you would think there is a whole spectrum of folks. There are families, going for a cheap day out and you can get your kid hot dog. They can see horses. And then there are guys like us, day trippers, people looking for a good time. And then there are the true track citizens.
Yeah. I want to say degenerate gamblers, but maybe the word is compulsive gamblers.
Committed
gamblers, let's say. So let's get into it. Let's we've done the virtual tour. Maybe now we can get into horse betting 101. How does that sound?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, then. Horse betting 101. So when you're in the concourse there at Santa Anita, you can bet on the Santa Anita races, but they also have TVs where you can bet on other races going on at other racetracks during race season. So, for instance, you can bet on a race going on at Churchill Downs in Kentucky where they run the Kentucky Derby. You can even, if you're an especially committed gambler, is that what we're
committed gambler?
If you're a committed gambler, you can do parlays where you say bet on Golden Boy at Santa Anita to win this race and Bronze at Churchill Downs to win his race. And if you hit both of them, you win the parlay, right? But some of these committed gamblers, they are kind of missing out on the live spectacle of the racing. Many of them do not leave the concourse. They basically are just crowded around the TVs, compulsively betting all day.
Kind of a similar feel to a antisocial teenager at a Thanksgiving dinner. Come on, everyone's here.
Yeah.
Everyone's here.
I'm playing Call of Duty. Yeah, exactly. And they're ripping the cigs, which is your right at the racetrack.
Inside,
of course, the concourse, so it's open air, but the point stands. They hand out, like at a baseball game, they hand out programs that tell you about the horses, how they did in their past races. And then there's also explainers on horse betting. So a really quick tutorial on horse betting. The main bets you can do are win, place, and show. And you can bet very small amounts. Like I think $1 is the minimum on most of them. But win, self-explanatory, the horse wins. Place, the horse has to either win or get second place. And show means the horse has to at least finish in the top 3. And it doesn't really matter where they finish. You can make more money if, say, you bet on them to show and they get first as opposed to third. I think there are. Is that what you remember?
I think that's just the way it is. If you place on it to show, that there's a certain amount of odds. So if you bet a big favorite to just show, then you're not going to get as big of a reward as if you bet that favorite to win and he wins. So if you're being more conservative with your betting, then you are not going to win as much money.
And the odds are a little different compared to sports betting. They do number to 1. So like a long shot is 200 to 1, whereas a horse that's expected to win, a favorite, is 2 to 1, right?
Yeah.
Whereas sports betting does more like plus and minus. So like an underdog is, say, plus 205.
Yeah, there's never such a favorite that they're in the negatives. They get really close to...
Too hard to get inside the mind of a horse.
Yes, which they try to do in the programs, which I really enjoy. You can really get into, like, how is this horse doing? Do they do good on turf? Do they do good on the dirt tracks? How have they been running recently? Are they an up-and-comer? Are they on the downslope? And then there's also my favorite part, the expert picks, which, I go back and forth as to whether or not you should trust them. It's like, why would they be giving away free game in the program there? But usually I feel like the way you bet on them is I liked to play some bets on some further out ones, some lesser favorites, some underdogs, to do things like place and show. And I actually mixed up what place and show meant, and I bet on a horse to place when I meant to bet on them to show, but the horse did place, and I won like a 17 to 1 bet, which paid for my beers and such for the day.
A hit of pure dopamine, because that was your first bet ever on a horse. And I think that's how people get addicted, right? Is you win big, $17, but you win big
huge
the first time, and you you get addicted. There's the old Norm Macdonald line about gambling, where you're not addicted. When you're addicted to gambling, you're not addicted to the result. You're addicted, say you're playing roulette, you're addicted to the moment after you cast your dice. Or sorry, no, what craps? Am I thinking of craps?
You're thinking of craps.
Craps. The moment after you cast your dice, but before you see how they come up. And what you're addicted to is hope,
Yes,
right?
the roulette, would be when it's bouncing around.
Right.
At the horse track, it's when they're coming around the bend and you can hear the
Yes.
hooves hitting the dirt, and they're just really coming down the stretch, and everyone rises as one, and everyone's cheering and yelling for their respective horse. Do the horses care? Do they hear you? Again, it is very difficult to get inside the mind of a horse.
We can't stress that enough. No man thus far has proven that he can get inside the mind of a horse. I'll say this about placing the bets. There's two options at Santa Anita, at least. You can do it into a machine, which fine, or you can go up to a teller and place the bet in person. And there's a very, secret coded language you have to use. Santa Anita race 5, Golden Boy to place in the blah, blah, blah,
in the
right?
fourth race. Yeah, so there's a very specific way to do it. You don't actually have to tell them that you're betting for the Santa Anita racetrack. That was something that a teller told me when I came up there sort of hemming and hawing, tracing my toe in a circle, very nervous, timidly. He's like, you did a very good job, but you don't have to tell me that you're placing a bet for Santa Anita. It's assumed since you're here. And we did do the teller as opposed to the machine, which, is an appealing option perhaps if you're that was what I think the people who regularly go to the track use. Me and you couldn't figure it out. I couldn't make heads or tails of it.
There's there's an inherent distrust in me of these machines. I'd rather look a fella or a lady straight in the eye and tell them the bet I'm placing on the horse.
I'd like to hand them over to George Washington's, which I believe is the minimum bet you can place, a $2 bet.
$1.
$1 bet you can
minimum,
play.
yeah.
Sorry, I was doing it for places and shows. Maybe for that you can only do a $2. But I like handing the money over, getting the stub and everything. I feel like a credit card, it takes away from this sort of, what we've been talking about, this nostalgic glory day feel of going back to the racetrack. But I think the other thing that is really the main appeal to me about being at the Santa Anita is going from watching the horse come first into the stable. You're like, I like that horse. That horse, he's got some good. What's he running at? Oh, those are great odds. I love those odds. Then you see him come out and he's vascular. There's all the veins. He's froth and his tongue's lolling around. His eyes are crazy. Like you think horses are these very regal, majestic figures. Right before a race, they are revved up. They do not have any of the human capacity to steel themselves or mask their emotions.
It's
They're
like
ready to
Kevin
run.
Garnett in the locker
Yes.
room before a playoff game,
Yeah.
just frothing, going crazy.
And you see that and you're like, that's my horse. That's the one I'm going to bet on. You go to the teller, you place your money on him, you lose track of the horse for a while, then you see him walking out on the track. They do one last little walk by everybody.
You mean the walking ring? The
walking.
ring?
Well, they
Yeah,
do the walking ring, then they come out onto the track when they're getting into the gate, and you're like, there he is. That's my guy.
Yeah.
I saw him when he was just back in the stable. And then, you watch him go around and you come down the finish. And there is a true thrill to scouting out a horse, having a good feeling about it, and then that horse delivering for you.
Yeah. No, the thrill of victory and then the agony of defeat. When you lose, you tear up your ticket, you throw it on the ground. There is littered with cigarette butts and ripped up losing tickets.
Yeah, you dejectedly slap the program against your knee and
then you gear up, you say, who's racing in the next one?
Let's go back to the stables, check out the next ones.
But we love the horse races, particularly at Santa Anita. I think overall what we really learned that we loved is that the horse races and the horse track, it is a place of beautiful contradictions. And I want to run through some of them. The horse races are very structured, yet there's a lawlessness to it. Okay. There's a lot of rules, a lot of ceremonies, like we say, the coded language to place the bet. But then also, like, you can drink, you can smoke. People are kind of doing their own thing, right?
There's no ushers coming around being like, hey, cut that out.
Right. You can jeer, you can cheer, right?
Yeah.
Any of it. Another great thing, it's beautiful yet grimy. So
Yes.
the grounds are very well maintained. It's beautiful landscaping. The colors are fabulous. As
There's
I
no
said, the
dust.
mountains in the distance.
There's no dust, there's no litter, but there is grime. There is
Yes.
the patina of many a person coming through here. There's Clark Gable's cigarette smoke embedded in the ceiling. It's You could just feel that so many different people have come through here.
And it's also, you mentioned families come there. The Santa Anita Park, it's family friendly, yet it's also seedy, right? You'll see families having their Dole Whip, having their hot dogs, cheering on horses.
Newborn babies bouncing on knees.
Right, but you'll also see guys with dyed hair, guys with toupees, guys on their third marriage, pissing away
Yellow
the kids' college fund.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, next, I think, it's a fun, cost-effective outing, but you can also lose it all, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a big issue is, like we said, $10 to get in. You bet a total of $10, even if you lose it all, at worst, it's a $20 day. Maybe you buy a couple adult beverages. All right, $30, $40. That's pretty cheap for Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, the racetrack, I mean, unless you're really betting big, the racetrack's going to come out ahead. If you're doing the little bets, you'll maybe buy yourself a couple free beers or a hot dog or something like that. You will end up owing the track money. They will make money off you.
The house wins. And on the other side of the coin, you could lose it all.
Yeah.
You could lose you could lose your hat, as they say.
You can bet every dollar you got at the racetrack, and they'll take that bet for you. They might say, "Are you sure about this, sir?" And if you say yes, they're like, "Very well."
Yeah.
Because they're in the money-making business. And if you want to give them your money, they will take it.
Last thing, I love the racetrack is nostalgic yet modern, which we covered. There's the Seabiscuit statue. Again, you can smoke in public. It's an older crowd for the most part. You feel all the history. The track's been there about almost 100 years, but it's also modern. They have the live betting. They have, the machines. They have all the modern amenities that you would want.
The televisions, showing all the other races. And of course, the other, I think, nostalgic, the timelessness perhaps of it is the call of the races is very stirring. The man who calls the races, it's, just like you've heard it when you've watched the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness or any of those things. But to hear it live gives it an extra, to hear it echoing off the stadium and all the sounds, much like the ballpark has the, crack of the bat, the organ sound, the horse track has the thundering hooves and the call of the ringing, the call of the announcer, the ringing of the bell, the trumpet occasionally. There are some very distinct sounds as well.
It's a beautiful place. One last thing, next door to the Santa Anita Park, the racetrack, is the Santa Anita Mall. And after a long day out in the sun betting on horses, I got to tell you, there's nothing better than sauntering into that mall, going to the Dairy Queen kiosk and getting a nice dip cone. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. It is one of the great food courts, maybe in all of America. It's a hot, humid place full of many smells.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A, they got Chipotle, they got, I noticed last time they got a fried chicken sandwich place right next door to Chick-fil-A. It's kind of like a, not a name brand place, but it feels like it was at the food court since the 80s, and then Chick-fil-A moved in, and the people were just like, hey, we ain't moving. We don't care how popular Chick-fil-A gets. We're open on Sunday, right?
It's sort of a Good Burger, Mondo Burger situation.
Yeah, if you will. Yeah. All right, cool. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back. All right, we are going to now discuss the rise and fall of the racetrack. But before we get into all that, John, you've kindly offered to share with our listeners a brief evolutionary history of the horse.
We've got to start at the beginning, Jim.
Take it away.
All right. So they evolved in North America millions of years ago. Many people may not know that. If you go to the La Brea Tar Pits, you can see a skeleton of a fossilized horse that was unlucky enough to get stuck in the mire there.
Yeah.
They thrived here for millions of years before crossing the land bridge to Asia and Europe, which humans famously crossed to come to North America. However, the horses did that kind of just before the humans came over, and then they went extinct in North America.
Oh.
So when humans got here, horses were not here.
Wow.
Until they were brought by European explorers. We don't need to go too deep into that. They brought over horses and other things.
Right.
But they brought the horses over here. Some of them escape. And they go they are released and they become wild in the place where they were originally evolved to. So that's why
Wow.
wild horses have taken off to such an extent
Wow.
in North America, and why they were so well adapted to it is because this is the place that they had adapted to millions of years ago. So I was just like, I think that's just such a fascinating concept, to evolve perfectly for a place, be taken away from there for millions of years, and then return there, and you're just like, oh man, this place rocks.
There's something about this place. I can feel it in my horse bones. Yeah.
And be like, if you had never been to the food court across from the Santa Anita racetrack your entire life, and then you were put in there and you're like, now this
is
a
right.
place.
DQ, Chick-fil-A. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So that's about it. That brings us up more or less
Wow.
to the modern day.
Shockingly interesting. I'm going to now take us to the rise of horse racing in America. So now that horses have evolved, we're here in the good old US&A. And horse racing here first got popular. It was late 19th century with the inauguration of the Triple Crown races, which are still around today. You got the Belmont Stakes, which started in 1867. The Preakness Stakes started in 1873. And the Kentucky Derby started in 1875.
Still a big deal today, obviously. I like how the Kentucky Derby were like, we're not doing stakes, we're the Derby.
We're the Derby.
Yeah.
Get your hats. The heyday of horse racing was kind of pre-World War II, 20th century, like particularly the 30s. I know at Santa Anita Park, a lot of stars of like the golden age of Hollywood, Clark Gable, Lana Turner, Cary Grant, they were known to frequent it. Singer and actor Bing Crosby was a stockholder there at Santa Anita.
Wow.
And horse racing was even popular into the 80s, I found. So, it had a little over 100-year run.
Wow.
Part of the reason was for a long time it was the only legalized form of gambling, but that changed with casinos in the 70s. And then also, other sports come around, right? What else is coming around?
Football, basketball, baseball obviously was popular at the same time, but overtook it.
Bingo. So there's a big dip in interest and popularity with horse racing. Kind of a big thing we got to touch on too, which is why horse racing has declined in popularity, is the notion of animal cruelty kind of inherent to the sport. Some of this information we got from an article from the Humane League. The name of the article was "The Slow Decline of Our Cruelest Sport." So,
it's a bit of an opinionated slant on it, perhaps, but at the same time, they bring some very fair points.
Yes, a lot of facts back it up. So one of the things in the U.S., more than 40 tracks have closed since 2000, and this is mostly due to changing views on animal cruelty. A few of the examples they go through in regards to how horse racing is difficult on animals. When the foals are young, they're separated from their mother to train. So there's the separation from their mother, which is not great. There's usually instances of confinement similar to zoos, where if you have any animal that is, meant to be running free, confinement is not a great thing. We all know that when horses get injured in racing, they're often killed. And the sport is, in addition to the animals, it's very dangerous for the jockeys. It's just an inherently dangerous sport.
And it's like being in a race car, but you're on the outside of the car.
And I don't think it's quite as bad as, say, bullfighting.
Right. In bullfighting, the point is to kill the bull,
right.
And obviously, if there's horses in the ring with bullfighting, and they're often injured as well. And the blood and the spectacle of violence is a huge part of bullfighting. Whereas it's kind of incidental and unfortunately related with horse racing.
So Golden Gate Fields, which the fateful place where your friend puked up hot dogs and cigars, was in the Bay Area. They shut down this past year. Because 15 horses died there during their 2023-2024 racing season. And then we talked about like watching on TV how great it is. Still a great spectacle, like watching the Kentucky Derby every year. But you had kind of watched recently and were struck by
very
something,
sort
weren't
of
you?
kismet thing. I was just threw on the TV, and it was the Breeders' Cup, which I would say is probably just one notch below the Triple Crown that you mentioned. Takes place at Del Mar, another beautiful old school racetrack. And I was watching the race right before the biggest race of the day, and they told me that a horse had gone down during it, and they were trying to get to. They had veterinarians, they had an ambulance, they had people all surrounding this horse, and they're like, "We'll provide updates when we get it." And they're again talking about all the horses that are going to be running in the big race. And then 10 minutes later, they're like, unfortunately, the horses died. We don't know what has happened. It was maybe the heart issue, they thought. And they're like, you never like to see this. This is the worst part of the sport. And there was definitely a pall that was cast over. It's clear that these people who care about this sport care about the animals as well. This is not a callous, this is not a thing that they just brush aside, that they don't care when something goes wrong with the horses. It's a tragedy.
Right.
But then the race went on and the big race happened. And, you know, even though that a horse had died, it was just a sad thing that happened, but it sort of is something that they've accepted it, and it's kind of part of it, which I think can make people rightfully a bit uneasy about it.
And I think it's the same argument as if you don't eat meat. It's like, you know, we eat more plant-based than we probably did when we grew up, but we still eat meat. And I totally understand people who are against eating meat. They have perfectly sound arguments for being against eating meat. And frankly, people who do eat meat, most of the arguments are centered around pleasure and just, well, hey, you know, mankind's on top of the food chain and it's sort of our right, which, you know, there's validity to that as well. But at the same time, there's a lot more sympathy and empathy with those who don't eat meat and are maybe opposed to horse racing practices.
I think it also is somewhat similar to the idea of the people who preserve natural habitats, such as in Africa, for big game hunting. And these people are obviously some of the biggest advocates for the animals, but the reason that they're advocates for the animals is to kill them when they sort of like a male has reached a, you know, like they've kind of had their prime, and the park people who are in charge of managing it say, okay, this is an okay animal to take this time. How you make those, you know, kind of decisions. And again, this is different from horse racing because, again, killing and violence is sort of the point there, whereas this is a thing that kind of comes separately. But it is these sort of, it's not necessarily these people are outsiders to the sport. They're people who care about animals, and they care about animals' rights, and I think rightfully so. But the people who are in charge of these animals have sort of accepted this risk as part of something that they love, and sort of showcasing these animals in maybe their most natural way. Because I think one thing that is fascinating about horse racing is I don't think you get to see horses show off their speed and their majesty almost in any other way. I mean, unless you're really out in the rural parts of America and you're watching wild horses running free, or you're at a farm, most people who live in a city don't typically get to see, if you see a horse, you see it trotting around with a fat police officer sitting on top of it. You don't see it, you know, going as fast as it can and pushing itself to its fullest extent. And I think that's a fascinating thing about it as well.
Yeah, another thing that it's, you know, when these horses, if they're not injured and killed, some of them will outlive their racing careers, at which point I saw some research online that a lot of them are exported to Mexico or Canada, where they're usually killed for their meat, which apparently... you know, in Europe and Asia, horse meat is not necessarily common, but it's eaten pretty regularly. I know, like, there's been instances in the U.S. when consumers have found out, like, oh my God, there's horse meat in this frozen food or whatever. People go crazy. It does beg an interesting question. Why are Americans okay eating chicken and cows and lamb and pork and veal, but we aren't cool eating horse meat? I mean, I think part of it is horses aren't necessarily bred for their meat, right? And they're leaner. They're bred more for sport and work. Whereas like chickens, cows, like probably would go extinct if you know, just because how we've bred them so selectively for their meat. But yeah, it is an odd, like, almost ethical question of why are Americans not cool with horse meat?
That's an interesting question. I would say my guess also is they're so tied up with the mythology of how Americans see themselves and cowboys and the sort of pioneering spirit that it's like almost, there's almost something un-American about it. And I think, you know, it's like a desperation food, like that, you know, when people were going west or whatever, like when they ran into the snowstorm, it's like, all right, well, the only thing that we have left is the horse. And so maybe that has some carryover effects. I think people also just sort of look at horses in a different way than they look at those other livestock animals.
Do you remember about, it was probably 13, 14 years ago, there was that show on HBO, Luck, with Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
Do you kind of remember that?
Yeah.
So it's about horse racing, and they actually shot it at Santa Anita. But that was a show that went on for one season, and they shut it down during production of season 2 because 3 horses total from the production of season 1 to the early part of season 2 got injured during the racing sequences and had to be euthanized. So it is like it has been this pattern like since kind of the decline of horse racing, where any time it's tried to be repopularized or reintroduced to the masses, these horse deaths, animal cruelty, however you want to categorize it, kind of casts a shadow over it all.
Yeah.
And so I think as an industry, that's just like something that is just a reality and something you have to deal with. But you were telling me too, one of our favorite authors, Chuck Klosterman, not sure how it's pronounced, Klosterman. But he's a good pop culture writer. You were saying he had a theory of people and horses, right?
Yeah. He expounded upon it one time, and basically the idea is that we don't have very much of a connection with horses in our daily life anymore, and even our fathers don't have connections with it. And I remember our grandpa once took us to a horse ranch where he'd known a guy, and that was the only time I'd ever ridden a horse, was because our grandpa took us there. And so people just don't, I think, really interact with horses on a regular basis. And if you've never really interacted with a horse, I think you would have a question as to why should I care about going to a racetrack? What do I care about seeing horses do this? I know humans, and humans are playing football and basketball and all of these other things. And yeah, football's kind of one too, where there is this accepted, risk in it as well.
Oh yeah.
That we've kind of come to grips with. But again, it's different, I guess, when it's a human being who's consciously making a choice. And as we've said, it's impossible to get into the mind of a horse. Would a horse, given the option, take the care and the life that it has as a champion racehorse? Do they get something out of this? Is there these Michael Jordans of horses that have this burning competitive desire that all they love to do is run and race? Or is this a human construct that we've imposed upon them? It's a difficult sort of thing to figure out. Again, you cannot enter the mind of a horse.
Yes, like a theme is emerging. But, even with all this, we still love horse racing. And, we talked about how it's, the sights and smells and the being part of a community that's so fun about going to a track and enjoying watching horse racing. But I think there's something deeper that you were kind of mentioning. And it even goes back to the evolution of the horse. But it's just like part of this country and many other countries, they were built on horseback. Yeah. And there is this, with horse racing, there's this celebration of this one-of-a-kind bond between man and horse.
Yeah.
And and maybe that's like cheesy, maybe that's romanticizing it, but I really think on a deep level that is what makes people fall in love with it, right?
I agree. I think it's the said by actor / President Ronald Reagan. There's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man.
Wow.
And we don't have that sort of relationship with a horse, but you when you're at the track, you are envious. You do wish that, like, man, I wish I could see a horse. We had a farm, grew up on a farm, and there were these horses that would come to the back fence where we would pick apples. And occasionally an apple would have fallen to the ground or something like that. We'd pick up an apple, hold it out to the horse. They'd get their big horse lips and horse teeth and slop it right out of our hand and crunch it right in our face. And there's something just like, wow, this is fascinating. Another funny thing, farm story, was one time a person was like, hey, we got this horse that, we'd love to just sort of let him graze around your property. And we had a lot of grass on our we were city slickers, more or less. And we were like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. That'd be awesome, having a horse around. Yeah. And the person comes by and they drop off the horse, and the horse just starts tearing around the property.
Buck wild.
Nuts.
Buck wild.
We're hunkered in the house, and eventually, like, watching it just sprinting back and forth, totally untamable. And I remember we got a phone call from another neighbor, and they were like, hey, did Joe try to give you his horse? Don't let him give you his horse. He's trying to pawn that horse off on everybody. So, these horses, they're fascinating creatures. But to your point, that there is this, almost like, I would say there's dog in terms of human relations with animals, and then there's horse right underneath it in terms of, look, that's a man's best friend, if there ever was one.
Cat and a distant third, I suppose. Yeah, but there is that unique bond for sure. Yeah. I think pivoting to kind of horse racing and just sort of sports in general, you think back to how horse racing was one of the big sports of the 20th century. The other two big ones were baseball and boxing. And the difference I think with baseball and boxing versus horse racing is baseball and boxing, though not as popular as they used to be during that time, are still popular. And I think the reason is they've adapted to modern times a lot better than horse racing. You look at baseball, like kind of probably their black spot in the last quarter century was the steroid era, although it was like popular and drove ratings.
The most popular. I mean, when we were growing up, seeing Barry Bonds walk up to plate was like, everybody get to the TV right now.
So much of the steroid era was must watch TV, must watch. But yeah, and then I think after that they struggled with like finding stars, and there's always this conversation in baseball. It's like, who's the next star? Who's the face of baseball and stuff, which is just kind of a dumb conversation. But we know who it is. It's Ohtani.
Yeah.
And I think like in a sport like where star power is so important, having star power is huge. I think you look at the last World Series with Yankees versus Dodgers, like, you know, at the MLB, if they could make a deal with the devil, probably the deal would have been, please put the Yankees and Dodgers in the World Series. So I think like with star power, and I think a big thing too is they made rule changes. Although it's this, you know, ancient sport with all these rules and ceremonies, they added a pitch clock. Mm-hmm. They added replay review. They have more of the analytics kind of front and center.
I'd say it's also much more incorporated into the local population's way of life.
Yes.
There are still people who listen to the ball game on the radio. They have it on in the background, maybe when they're picking up their kids from school and helping them with their homework. You go to Dodger Stadium, everyone is wearing Dodgers gear. Yeah. Everyone cares about the team. Everyone knows about the team. The stadium's always packed. When it's during the playoffs, there's a different feeling around the city of Los Angeles. We are substitute teachers, and often people are talking to us about the games. They assume that we know about the Dodgers and are following them intensely. And I think that's just something that does not exist with horse racing. It is not involved in people's daily routine or seasonal routine at all.
And I think boxing, you know, again, less popular, but they've adapted as well. I think they've kind of coupled with UFC and almost WWE too. It now is just sort of fighting in general. And, you know, UFC is obviously more popular than boxing, but boxing still has a way of building these star matches. I think, you know, for all the weirdness and bizarreness of it, the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson from a ratings perspective was a huge success. The kind of last big fight I remember before that for like casual boxing fans was probably Mayweather Pacquiao, which would have been 2015, something like that.
Yeah.
And so you know, it's like a shame that like, you know, Mayweather Pacquiao, that's kind of Pacquiao especially, but both guys are kind of past their prime, and then Tyson, it's like 58 years old. It's like
way past.
It's just a little ridiculous, right? But it's like it was still weirdly captivating. So
certainly the lead up to it was. And I think what it also has, boxing and UFC, is the spectacle of it is very striking. There's celebrities that come out. There's this tension that is in the air before the fight. It's just like, man, these guys are actually going to go into the ring and slug each other as hard as they can. Or in the case of the Paul and Tyson fight, these women are going to go into the ring and slug each other. I mean, that was the real fight that was worth watching. Those ladies were beat up, and there is something just visceral, and it just taps into something, again, very primal about human, where you just see two people going at it. And, you know, other sports, they take these sort of maybe violent hunter urges that exist within all human beings, and they channel them into football, which is, you know, still very violent, but there is so much structure and rules. And baseball, you're slugging a ball. Basketball, there's so much grace. Fighting is just take that competitive energy and apply it in the most direct way possible. And I think that's what its, you know, still appeal is. And with horse racing, you're asking that competitive desire to come through the raising and training of this horse, this jockey. And again, we run into the intractable problem of it is impossible to get inside of the mind of a horse, and you don't know if they've got that killer instinct.
Yeah, I think, you know, if like boxing and baseball, horse racing wants to make a comeback, the biggest thing it needs to do is address the safety of the horses. And really, I think it comes down to minimizing risk. I think as a whole, suffering is inherent to pretty much anything people enjoy. You know, you think about like McDonald's and fast food. If you support that, you're supporting deforestation and you're supporting animal cruelty. If you own an iPhone, you're indirectly supporting human suffering, child labor. If you have a social media account, you are, supporting data mining and, spreading of misinformation and even election interference. And, you talked about the NFL, UFC, you talk about especially with the NFL, CTE is a huge issue. And it's yes, we talk about abuse to horses and stuff, but it's what about abuse to human beings? WWE, UFC, these are real issues with all these sports. So I think part of it is justifying your pleasures. And it's just what trade-offs are you willing to accept to enjoy the thing you want to enjoy? We were looking into some ways that horse racing can be made safer. A few of the things we found online is these racetracks can test the turf and soil conditions a little more regularly. So apparently different types of surfaces can lead to different injuries. If there's a very hard or fast surface, they call it in horse racing, that can lead to kind of bone breaks or degenerative issues, especially if you're racing time and time again and training a lot. Think about as a human being, if you're going on a jog and you run on concrete versus dirt, right? It's gonna be harder on your joints. You've felt that, haven't you?
Certainly.
And knees. So softer, muddier surfaces, those tend to lead to more soft tissue injuries, pulled muscles, stuff like that. So kind of finding that balance and what is a quote unquote safe track. Horses are very susceptible to extreme heat. So racing season typically doesn't go through the summer. I know at Santa Anita, it's December to June, and it's still pretty cool in June in Los Angeles. So they talk about keeping the horses cool, keep them in the shade, keep them hydrated. If they are overheated, scratch them. I think that's a big thing too, is there's this human financial interest and I want to bet on this horse, or the stockholders are this horse needs to run so I can win the purse. And it's just dude, if a horse, you're worried about it getting injured or it's not looking good, just scratch it. It's screw the human interest. It's just you got to kind of look after the horse. I think especially if horse racing wants to make, a comeback and get more mass appeal.
Kind of a classic short-term versus long-term thinking.
100%. A thing I read about Santa Anita is they have invested in this imaging equipment. So a big thing they're investing in is preventative veterinary care. So kind of diagnosing these injuries before they happen. So if a horse seems it's susceptible to have an injury, keeping it out of a race. So I think that's pretty cool. I think Santa Anita in that way is pretty progressive as a racetrack. But anyway, this is all to say that, we think that despite some of horse racing's controversies and drawbacks, we still think it has a place in our modern world. And so when we come back, we're going to pitch ideas on how to fix the horse racing industry and give it more mass appeal. That's right, buddy.
You've heard of Shark Tank, and we're going to play a little game of Horse Tank.
Right after this. All right, we're back. Okay, so we're going to play Horse Tank. I'll explain the game, buddy. Let's pretend we are consultants. All the racetracks around the United States, from Churchill Downs to Santa Anita Park, they've come together and they're begging us. They're begging the Flynn brothers to consult them as to how to make horse racing more popular. And we're going to take turns pitching them Shark Tank style. So it's not a perfect one-to-one of Shark Tank. That's why it's Horse Tank.
We're sort of in the prep period before. We are not the horses in this scenario. We are pitching the horses. If the horses are the sharks in the Horse Tank.
Sure. Pretty confusing, but sure.
Mark Cuban is a horse.
Yes.
He's no longer a shark. He is a horse. We are pitching
So this
horses.
is us going back and forth.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we'll decide, this is us before we enter the Horse Tank. And we're going to go back and forth, pitch ideas to each other. At the end, we'll kind of come up with either one idea we declare the winner, or maybe we'll combine a couple ideas. I don't know. Neither of us have seen each other's ideas, so we're coming into this fresh.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of friendly competition, I'm going to let you go ahead and go first.
Thank you very much. But first, a bit of fanfare. Welcome to the Horse Tank. All right.
Great.
So my first one here, this is an easy one right off the bat. More horses in daily life. We need to get horses back into American life. I mean, the only time you ever see them are, as I said, fat cops riding them around at a parade, which I think is a decent entry point. More cops friendlier, like we have to take away the brutality aspect of it, which a bit of a difficult sell perhaps, but more
Right.
horse cops. Perhaps.
More horse cops.
More horse
okay.
cops. I would like to see,
Okay.
and just riding around, not even necessarily trying to maintain order, just being like, clop, 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 what's going on today? Not in a
Gotcha.
patrol car, clopping around.
I have concerns about implementation, but continue with your idea.
Yeah, and look, we'd have to train a lot of cops to ride horses,
Right.
to make them be cool on the horses. These horses are almost a outreach program by the
okay.
police.
Yeah.
I worked on a political campaign for a sheriff, and one of his ideas actually was to get more sheriffs on horses.
Wow.
Because he said he would ride them in to, communities that hadn't seen horses, and people are, they're gorgeous, majestic creatures. It makes you want to come up to them. Maybe you start having a conversation with the cop. Listen, we lost the election. It was not a
Right,
big
yes,
a big winner
It
of an
didn't work
idea.
out.
No, it
But
didn't.
your horses as a societal olive branch is what you're explaining
Yes,
here.
partially for police. Now, I am struggling to think of other uses for horses. I mean, mainly they pull things, and we have machines that do that a lot easier, and they don't leave huge piles of crap.
Right.
So that is a little bit of a difficulty, but certainly we can start with them.
Okay.
Maybe meter mains on horses. I'm just spitballing here.
It sounds like more police on horses is the idea.
Yeah, less of them in cars, more on
horses. Okay, interesting idea.
Yeah.
I struggle with implementation, but possible.
This is a horse tank. There's no bad ideas.
No
in the
bad
horse
ideas.
tank.
Sorry, I violated the first
So
rule of
far,
horse
eventually
tank.
will. But
We'll get a
you're right
bad
to
one.
raise a few objections or questions.
Before I get to my idea, I like to explain the need of which my idea will fulfill.
It's a classic pitch technique.
Classic pitch technique in horse thing. And I think anyone who's been to a horse race would agree that it's pretty male dominated in terms of the audience. So I think if horse racing is serious about reaching out and getting people who don't typically come to the track to come to the track, they need to appeal to women, particularly young women. So here is my idea. When you think about horses and you think about women, the first thing that comes to my mind is horse girls, right? And for those who don't know, a horse girl is sort of a socially awkward, often pale-skinned woman who's obsessed with horses, young woman who's obsessed with horses. Correct me if I'm wrong, they'll occasionally, like us, make horse noises and act as though they are a horse. Is that correct?
There was a girl in my class coming up in elementary school who was with me from kindergarten to 8th grade, who certainly went through a very strong horse girl phase, had horses on all of her folders, horse backpack, pretended to be a horse, had hair that she would be constantly putting into ponytails, which she would brush as though it were probably a horse's tail, I guess, is the thing that you're brushing.
Probably used mane and tail shampoo.
Yeah.
I don't think
a fine product.
It is a fine product. We use the conditioner. But anyway, I think what we do for the horse racing industry, we do horse girl Instagram influencers.
Wow.
So you gotta find a horse girl who A, is obsessed with horses, but B, is not too socially awkward that they can't be, an influencer. They need to be charismatic. They need to be personable, right? So I think you find a very charismatic horse girl influencer to take photos with horses, say at Santa Anita, to showcase them. This is Blue Sky. He's a Yabba breed, and he's blank years old, And you kind of, by associating these horses with this horse girl influencer that everyone's gonna like, it makes not only horse racing in general more popular, but even these horses individually more popular.
Yeah.
People are living vicariously through her, enjoying her brushing them and her falling in love with these horses. If such a horse girl influencer does not exist, this is a great use for artificial intelligence. I think it can cook up a rather
you want to do a Michaela horse girl. That's the AI pop star.
Yeah, so an AI horse girl influencer, again, this is, I dinged you on your idea for implementation. This to me seems very easily implementable.
I think you got it.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Implementable.
you landed the plane there.
Another thing I would just add about these racetracks, you got to add Instagrammable locales. So Santa Anita is very beautiful, but if you just paint one of the walls bright pink, or you put a set of wings on one of the walls, you paint some wings on the walls, and someone can stand in the middle and pretend like they got wings. That you got to appeal to kind of young women, women who are online. You got to, willing to spend some money. You got to kind of get that crowd out to the horse races. So horse girl Instagram influencers.
I like this a lot. I see a flower arch. I see neon signs that have, sort of kind of winsome slogans with a little bit of edge to them.
In cursive, it says, "I'm a horse girl."
Yeah, there's lots of events where I went wine tasting somewhat recently, and there was a big party of women, perhaps in their 30s, a lot of disposable income. They were in their dresses. They were having a big fun day. Don't do that at the winery. Do that at the horse track.
Right.
But the horse track has to make that accessible for them.
Great.
I like this idea. I have something to kind of go along with it, but it is my best idea, so I'm going to be saving it for last. But horse girl influencer, there's something I'm going to let the audience sort of sit with this for a second.
Good.
My other pitch, and this I guess I should have perhaps tied this with my more horses in daily life. I think we need to have urban horse tracks. There are large sections of most American cities that are essentially run down. They're not being used. There are huge warehouses that are not contained. In Sacramento, there is an area called the rail yards where...
Well, they actually just struck a deal to turn it into a soccer stadium, but your point persists, yes.
I think maybe we could even do it around the soccer stadium.
Great,
Who knows?
great.
I'm not sure how
You're spitballing.
I'm spitballing. This, again, would allow there to be horses more in daily life as they walk perhaps from the stables to the thing. The other thing about the horse track is that it is a place to imbibe. It is a place to have a good time. However, it is usually a 30-minute drive, it feels like, from major places where people live.
Right.
This could be something where you go out on a Saturday afternoon. This is your new brunch. This is your new... We are appealing, I think, we're hitting on something where a young professional...
The 18 to 49,
leisure crowd here. We've got older folks, I think, still have maybe an appreciation of the racetrack. We're aiming for the younger demographic. And I think, you make it, it would be difficult to recreate the sense of nostalgia that somewhere like Santa Anita has. But I think letting people have sort of up close and personal experiences with the horses, a Top Golf for horses, in a way.
Okay.
Not at all that you're hitting golf balls at horses, certainly not.
Right.
But that it's a more accessible version of this thing.
Yeah.
Sports gambling has taken off huge. So I just think, I don't do any sports gambling. I believe it's illegal in California, but it's the only time that I've really ever felt a deep appeal to want to gamble on sports is at the horse track. And I think people would enjoy it.
I think it's a strong idea. Again, I come to this issue of implementation. I mean, these are, you're like Adam Driver in Megalopolis. You have these ideas for a utopia centered around horses, and it's an interesting idea, but what are you going to do? You're going to level some warehouses and build a tight track, and people are going to have a brunch and mimosas and watch. I mean, it's a beautiful dream, but it maybe will just stay a dream. I just don't see it in reality. You know what I mean?
Every person is 5 minutes from a park and a theater and a horse track.
For the millions who did not see Megalopolis, that's
a pitch perfect Adam Driver.
All right, well, not bad, buddy. All right, here's another one I got. So let's talk jockeys for a second.
Okay,
it's a subculture we and most people do not know much about, and I think the jockeys like it that way. And
from what I saw in Seabiscuit, they get up to some stuff.
There has been, I found in my research, there has been a Jockeys was a reality show where kind of covered jockeys. I think it's Santa Anita, actually. It was on like Discovery Channel or something, maybe 15 years ago. So, that idea has been done. There was a movie that came out a few years ago called Jockey, sort of a drama about a down and out jockey, sort of a redemption tale. I assume a booze and ketamine addiction was roped in there. Easy to get ketamine around all those horses.
Yeah.
But anyway, my idea, these are kind of darker, grittier portrayals. I think you got to go broad. You got to go fun. I want to see CBS sitcom multicam called Jockeys. and it's super broad. You got the laugh track, the bright colors. You got the big stars, the TV stars. It's the sets. They got the stables. Sort of their back room where they have a coffee break and stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't. I think with the HBO show Luck, they had all the horse injuries and the euthanasia and stuff. With this, you just don't even really have to show the horse racing that much. It's mostly just about them and their personal lives. Some things I'd want to see, them just kind of shit talking each other. They're competitive fellas, these jockeys. An episode where they're dating the same tall woman would be fabulous. I'm just spitballing here. All the boozing, the carousing, I imagine. It's kind of like Cheers,
It's rubbing a little bit up against the CBS family-friendly 3 sitcom. They're going to be boozing and carousing, but this is a thin needle to thread.
And most importantly, it's implementable. This is not some far-fetched utopian pipe dream. This is I could have a meeting at CBS tomorrow and sell this.
You're telling me that a hit network show is not a pipe dream.
well. In this current climate. All right. Jockeys, CBS sitcom. All right, your next idea.
Okay. Mine is somewhat similar to yours, but it goes the opposite direction. It tacks a different way. There was a huge Formula One documentary on Netflix that really made things pop for that sport. I think we need something similar for horse racing. I think the difficulty of it is that it is not something where it travels around as much. I think these jockeys, I guess some of them do travel with the horses, but you would choose, your top horses, your top jockey pairings, and you would follow them throughout the course of a season. You would get to know the intense sort of, again, to your point about jockeys on the CBS sitcom, we're not manufacturing these. We are mining the real slights and disappointments and egos and frustrations of these people, which I imagine there's a rich inner world. I would also love to get an inside look at these people who own horses and train horses. I'd love, can't you just see, you hear, you're out in Kentucky, you're the bluegrass, they have the track, you're seeing the horses, you're getting they ran a really good one, he's coming on strong. You're hearing this sort of the chatter, the banter.
Chills.
Yeah. You'd get this. I think it's a very pastoral dream that would appeal to us in this very urbanized era.
This is good. This is implementable. I can see it. It gave me chills. And yes, it's colder weather here in Los Angeles, but yes, it gave me chills. I really like it. I think, the reality show I was talking about that was on the Discovery Channel was a little just sort of paint by numbers reality show. You're talking about a really gritty, really cinematic, really get people invested. I really like it. I really like it.
I'd watch it.
Oh, it's great. No, it's a great idea. Great idea. All right, I got one more for you. When you go to Santa Anita, there's a huge parking lot. Wow. Massive parking lot.
Fascinated by the open of this.
Thank you, buddy. I like establishing the need and then the solution. So there's a huge parking lot, ample parking always. And prime racing season at Santa Anita goes from December to June. Prime is kind of that April, May area. Not a lot going on in the sports world. It's after football. Yeah, the NBA playoffs are heating up. Yeah, baseball's starting. I think what we need to do, the weather's warming up. I think we should promote horse race tailgates in the parking lot. Awesome. So I think, this would really appeal to the college crowd. Okay. You don't have any more college football games to go to. These kids, you could hang around the frat or the sorority house or, play your beer pong, whatever else. But I think you bus them from UCLA, you bus them from USC, you bus them from LMU, you bus them from CSU Long Beach, and you send these rowdy gents and lasses to Santa Anita in the parking lot, and you could just play a whole bunch of drinking games, make it a big party in that giant parking lot. Just all that real estate just sitting there. And I think too, this sounds like more adult fun, but I think you can make it kid friendly. You get some jump houses for the kids, big soda fountain.
Inflatable obstacle course.
Absolutely. And to that point, I think you got the kids there, right? And people like betting. I think you do a thing where you make the kids race and you bet on these kids racing. So you have an under you have an under 6 division. So you got 4, 5, 6-year-olds racing. I got I got $5 on little Tony.
I got 20 on Joey.
Yeah. Oh, he just got over a cold. I'm not gonna bet on him.
Skinned his knee at recess on Friday.
Yeah. His ankle's not looking so good. So yeah, I think that'd be funny. I think if you don't want to race kids, I don't think that's child labor either. I think the kids would love it. I think you brought this idea. Parents told kids, "Hey, we're gonna bet me and your uncle are gonna bet money on you to beat some other kids at a parking lot in Arcadia this weekend. What do you think?" Kid would be like, "What time we leaving?" And whose car? The minivan or the sedan? Mom coming?
Their gem in the town.
It's in the town. Whose car are we taking? So yeah, I think that'd be fun. If you don't want to do the kids race, and then you can have adults and do like piggyback ride races and bet on
carnival.
Those. But really, just get into the spirit of horse racing. Knock a few adult beverages back. Really enjoy all that real estate they got out there.
It's a very fascinating idea. Certainly, some ethical qualms could be raised, not necessarily by me, but I think the one drawback perhaps is it may sully some of the vibe of the racetrack. It is a laid back atmosphere. It is not a college football rowdy situation. I love the idea. I love bringing the party to the track, but I do think it is more of a a very demure, very mindful place to go. For people, but again, I think the kid racing is a very inspired.
Thank you, buddy.
Yet potentially problematic idea. However, here's you. I'm going to give you credit right here in a sort of backhanded way. Boy, you sure came close with that horse girl idea. You really did. You were just rapping right on the door, but I need to push you right over the finish line. I'm going to say 3 names to you right now. This is what the sport of horse racing needs. It needs a Danica Patrick / Caitlin Clark / Vivi Dune. You need to get a trailblazing and, let's be honest, smoking hot female jockey to start laying waste to the field. Not only does she look great on Instagram, she is your influencer. This is going to take a very singular type of person. It may only be achievable through AI. But she looks great with the horses. She rides them like nobody else. She's leaving people in the
That's
dust.
the most important thing. It seems like like Michael Jordan, he was attractive, right? So it's like the attractiveness is just the cherry on top. You need to have the competitiveness, the drive.
Yes,
right?
It is a fusion thing. I mean, LeBron James is every bit as good as Michael Jordan, but he does not look as good on camera. This is, to be fair, this person needs to have the star factor, the it factor. I think it is achievable. There have been several female jockeys who have run in the Kentucky Derby. There are several overseas that I researched. But yes, you need somebody who is going to generate controversy, who is going to get people to care about the sport of horse racing again. And I think, maybe it's I think you've kind of seen a little bit of it with it's maybe the Jake Paul, that sort of way. She's she's the problem child. She's got this. She doesn't care about tradition. She's kicking in the door of this boys club, and she is going to, and this would be who in my dream world I would pitch as the star of that Netflix documentary that we're going to be making. And the other thing I think that's especially doable about this in terms of implementability is that being a jockey is, to me, something that we talk about physical differences between men and women and how that plays out into athletic sports. I just don't think it really applies for horse racing. I think that most jockeys are in the height range of an average female.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
There's no reason why a
woman
can't ride a horse, I think, as well as a man. Perhaps I don't know well enough about this, but I believe that there doesn't seem to be, like, it's not like no one's gonna women play the game of basketball beautifully, and the WNBA is at an all-time peak. No one is going to soar through the air like LeBron James, which is too bad. However, the women, I think, could really run these horses well, and I think we could get this. This is the person who horse racing should be scouring the nation for. I think she would have to have an innate love of horses. She would have to be a horse girl. You'd have to probably find her early. It'd have to be sort of a Dune, Paul Atreides type of situation. We need a Muad'Dib of horse racing.
We need a Messiah. Yeah. I hear it. I'm 100% on board. We're aligned, as they say in the corporate world. Here's what I'll say. You mentioned kind of making her the star of this competition show. I'll take you a step further. America's next top female jockey.
Wow.
American Idol plus this jockey F1 documentary series. You scour the world. I don't know who the judges would be, but I think you take a judge from the world of horse racing. You take a judge from the world of entertainment, maybe a judge from the world of modeling, influencer culture, wherever. And like you said, it just needs to be a person that is the center of this insane Venn diagram.
Yeah.
I do think it's great. I think this is the idea we bring to the horses, not the sharks, the horses. The horses will love this.
I'm going to take 15% for $500,000.
Yeah. That's sold. Yeah. No, this is great, man. I love the idea. What do you think? Do you feel pretty good about America's Next Top Female Jockey?
I feel like
something like that.
It's
maybe?
probably the only way to identify her.
Yeah.
I don't know how much if there is even such a person aiming for this currently. But hey, we didn't know there were so many golden bachelors and bachelorettes before we started looking for them.
Got me there. He's John Flynn. I'm Jimmy Flynn. That was Horse Tank. Please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating for the Flynn Brothers podcast. Send your questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer, Will Slade, and we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers podcast. Take care, buddy.
Take care.